Suffering from delusions of grandeur. Hello, my name is Eva and welcome to Jones Moans. For the last few years I've been upsetting people, probably because I moan too much. I get into bother when Donald Trump pops into the conversation. This is probably because I agree with him on a few points. When President Trump also made objections about Huawei, I openly tried to agree with him. If President Trump came up in conversation with friends or family, I would sometimes say, "I'm with Trump." Instead of people asking why I agreed, their faces flipped and they looked at me as though I was a nutter. The first time I tried, I got, "Don't tell anyone you agree with Trump about anything. People will think you agree with everything he says." Now, I thought this was a bit odd. Most of the time I was trying to argue from the viewpoint of a pedant. I tested big network systems. If you do this, by default, you are a pedant. If you've got this far with my videos, you'll realise I probably deserve the title of Queen of Pedants. Testing systems means you have to think of all possible outcomes. If you make a declaration like Huawei is a security risk, as I did, it wouldn't be on a hunch. Objecting to Huawei was probably the last of a long line of objections I made while I was working at BT. As a system tester, you not only had to think about all the likely outcomes, you had to think about unlikely ones, especially when people were involved in pressing the buttons on a system, because it's extraordinary what people will do to reach a stretching target in order to secure their bonus. When an unlikely outcome presented itself outside the normal set of tests, you shouldn't just ignore it. An unlikely outcome could be that Huawei arrived on a network, then nicked as much of their competitors' information that they could, and then made a declaration that they were a key player. What bothered me was that even if I tried to have a pedant-type argument when you mentioned Donald Trump, people would grimace and sometimes start shouting things like, well, he's a misogynist or a liar or a racist. And the name Trump was like a trigger for madness. I've also been called a misogynist, a racist and a liar and many other things. Misogynist was a bit confusing, another story for another day. It doesn't mean I am, it just means I upset people a lot. I think the funniest rebuke I heard was when a friend mentioned the 2020 US presidential election. He said Trump thinking he had won the election when he hadn't was a joke. My friend then said Donald Trump suffers from delusions of grandeur. Now, with my pedant head, I said, Donald Trump was the President of the United States. That's quite a grand job. I was trying to say you can't suffer from delusions of grandeur if you're very grand. There is an argument I've had with quite a few people, and again I've been laughed at. This is to do with the US 2020 elections. I watched some of the press conferences alleging voter fraud. I also watched some of the trial. As a pedant system tester, you not only had to think about all the likely outcomes, you had to think about unlikely ones, especially when people were involved in pressing buttons on a system, because it's extraordinary what people will do to reach a stretching target in order to secure their candidate. In this case, the voting system used for the US presidential 2020 election was not fit for purpose. Voter fraud could not be proved because the whole system was so insecure, the integrity of any vote on that system could not be proved. Officials from the Democrats and the Republicans will have looked at that voting system and thought, bet we can have some fun with that. Speaking as a pedant who has tested many large systems, I do not believe Biden received 81 million votes. I also do not believe Trump received 74 million votes. Why is this important? The United States of America has lost the ability to hold a secure election. In this week, Easter week, when we celebrate moral leaders being crucified, I think someone needs to point out that indicting President Trump is a bit pointless. I don't think even Donald Trump thinks that much of himself. Some of us pedants think the New York Supreme Court is reading from a Goon Show script. Thank you for watching.